Hi there, ladies and gentlemen out in internet land. This is your friend Charlie Hunter with the Reasonably Fine Art Talk. Ms. Betty Sue is upstairs on the third floor, pulling the strings behind the scenes. And with us today is one of my favorite painters, Miss Felicia Forte, who I first met at the Plein Air Convention in Monterey, California in 2014, I think it was. And she's a peripatetic artist and is doing wonderful, wonderful work. I think it's really exciting to have her with us today. Welcome, Felicia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's fun to talk to you again. It's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah. So your history, you just outlined it to me, and it was, as I said, peripatetic, far more peripatetic than I had thought. You were originally from LA.
Mm-hmm.
You went to New York, where you studied at the Art Students League.
Yeah, not that time. The next time I went to New York, I studied at the Art Students League, but yes.
All right. Then you went to New York. Then you went to New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Lived in New Orleans, and then Katrina hit, and you went back to New York, and then you studied at the Art Students League.
Yeah.
And then you went to San
Francisco,
which is where I remember visiting you at your studio in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And then you went to Hamtramck, Michigan for a while.
Yeah. And then also other parts of Detroit. I ended up staying there for 6 years.
And it kind of you were one of the it was like the young arts people coming to Detroit.
It's the manifest destiny. I took my wagon and my horses and traveled across.
And now you've returned to San Francisco. Now,
yeah.
you for when I first met you, you were really making your living as a teacher. You were doing a lot of workshops. Is that still what your bread and butter is, or are you doing more just selling your work?
Yeah, it's shifted. I think so. Teaching, I did from like 30 to 42. I'm 43. Let's think of years. I don't know, 10 years, 12 years I was teaching. But kind of a few years before I did a pivot where I'm doing more coaching now, kind of creativity coaching stuff. Well, I made that phrase up, so I don't know if anyone knows what that is. It's on my website. I think like I taught a lot because I needed to still learn technique, and you learn a lot by teaching. And then when I wasn't interested in that, it started to kind of detract instead of add to my energy. And so I needed to figure something out, and I needed to think deeper. Mm-hmm. So I'm now thinking deeper with people, and we're figuring that out together. And so that's what I'm doing now. I sell my work. I haven't had a gallery for a while, so I'm just kind of doing that independently, which is cool. And yeah, that's
interesting. So let's take a tour through the world of Felicia Forte artwork. Betty Sue, could you make us teeny? And there we go. So this is a slideshow that Felicia has put together. So let's just take it through. Talk to us about these pieces as we look at them. And I'll ask questions.
So this is the one I finished most recently. I think I only finished 3-4 paintings this last year, which I'm cool with because it's been a lot of transition, and I'm slowing down has been a big lesson. So I started dating a year and a half ago, again, after a long relationship, and then a year break after the end of a long relationship. And so kind of what I've been working on is observing myself in that arena in my 40s. Am I viable? Can I be playful? How does it feel if I'm vulnerable? And if it's not responded to, if I'm not getting the response I need. So this is me. I sent this. It's really super vulnerable, but to a lover I had. It's a selfie. That's kind of the parameter of the ones I'm doing. Is the view can only be as far as my arm is. And I kind of was dissatisfied with the interaction. And I was compelled and mortified at my, I don't know, desire to paint these. But I feel like I've learned to know, like, I'm only going to be able to have the energy to paint things that I'm really called to paint now. Otherwise, it just falls flat. And I was really into painting these little selfies I took. And I couldn't figure out why at first. And then I realized I just was working on self-love and like doing something not for someone else, but just because I wanted to. And I don't know, a million brushstrokes on your torso is a form of self-love, and sharing your journey with everyone is also like self-acceptance. So they're kind of just like everything else. If it's a painting of a sandwich I made, or the corner of a room, or me, it's just me sharing what I'm learning.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the things that I've often quoted when in doing these reasonably fine art talks is Richard Schmidt saying the great thing about art is it lets you see what the world feels like to someone else. And I think this is an extraordinary painting, and both compositionally and the sense of gravity and the lusciousness of the paint handling. So to divorce it from subject for a moment, I'm curious about the fact that you did it in a circle, on a circular canvas. And I'm also curious about the paint layering itself, because it looks like there are some layers that are thin, but then have a very thick impasto. Is it out of the tube thickness of paint in the top layers?
Well, I don't think very much about those kind of technical things very much anymore, which is why I'm not teaching them, because I find them tedious. I'm just doing what feels natural. But it's round because, and this is something key, I realize, it's because someone asked me to create a round painting for a group show. And God, I love a challenge, a deadline, a parameter, a restriction. Like, if I have total freedom, I am not my highest creative self. If someone says, Felicia, you have 3 months and I need 5 paintings or 20 paintings and they have to be this size and this theme, I can, like, under that pressure, do better. So it's round because they asked. It's the second one I did for the show. It's actually going to be in a show at Harmon Projects in New York, Lower East Side, in a week or 2. So I dropped it off there already. So that's why it's round. It was a challenge. Actually, I think I started like 4 of them because getting the right one to fit into a round thing was hard. Texture-wise, I think it probably just comes from a million alla prima paintings where you've got 3 hours, and if you start thin and you build up, then it's just easier to go in one direction instead of having to make a mess and clean it up.
Fair enough. And it comes from hours and hours and hours and hours of you working on your craft, because you did all those portraits for years. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. Next slide. Okay, so is this part of the same sort of series of the?
Yeah, this is another small, though this one is actually from the last time I was single. I had a bunch of pictures and I saved files and files of them. I was doing the same thing then and observing myself, but I wasn't yet mature enough or comfortable enough or evolved enough to be able to share them, or I don't know, meet that need I had. So I still have a bunch from that interim period which is mirroring this one. It's like I'm now having a second chance to learn stuff.
Cool. That, compositionally, I think this is really interesting with that green field at the top and the stylization that is occurring in here. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we had John Porter Lassiter from Arkansas on, and he plays with edge in a way that is quite similar to the way that you do, in that you're really defining your edges quite abstractly, but then in some places you'll lose the edge and have that gradated tone. And so when I squint down at this, it becomes very much like, it reminds me of Matisse's paper cutouts in a way, because of those definite edges. What were you exploring in terms of paint? Was there any adventure going on in this realm?
No, I mean, it's just so intuitive at this point. I like abstraction, probably because it was a very helpful, practical tool that I resonated with when I was learning, the linear stuff, like the little white outliney part at the back of the shoe and the shirt on the left bottom is just something that I started doing when I was doing Alla Prima Portrait, and it's just flow. It's just, I have 5 more minutes. I need to finish something. I don't have a lot of time. It's just there. All the way I paint is the solutions created under pressure that worked and were me. So I'm just painting in a way that I feel looks beautiful and feels right. I'm never thinking about, like, I need 40% edge softness and I need 20% paint thickness. Boring.
Did you think about those things at one stage in your painting journey?
No, not really. I call that Frankensteining a painting, or like, I think what I've told my students is try to, have a good framework of a process that someone else has put together and start with that. Eventually you'll take stuff and leave stuff. But the only thing you should be thinking about when you're learning is trying to portray your subject honestly to the best of your ability. And within that goal, your voice in paint emerges. But I often have to talk people out of, they're like, well, they'll send me a list. Artist A, B, and C does amazing things with color. I want that. Artist 1, 2, and 3 does edges. I want that. And so they're trying to figure out how to intellectually, like, Frankenstein together the perfect painting, and it negates, it totally skips over their sensibilities that they need to, like, trust and flow. We all have our voice. We don't have to develop it. You just have to uncover it.
Right. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. I think that's a very good point. And it is something, well, we were texting again about that when I asked you to be the guest here, because you said you were talking to one of your coachees, that what we inherently are able to do, we tend to discount because we're able to do.
Why don't you give yourself credit? What I said was, the piece of advice you gave me when we first met and talked was something that I always remembered. It was a gem, and it was that we discount a thing that comes natural or easy to us because we think, and things should be hard. Hard work equals good. There's enough hard work you're going to have to do no matter what. If something comes easy to you, and that was what you said, and it really stuck with me.
Well, I'm glad that was useful, and it seems true. It seems true in the intervening years. I still would hold with that. Now this one is larger than the two that preceded.
Yeah,
it's a couple of years earlier. It's 2019.
Yeah, I did this probably maybe 2021, while I was still in Detroit. Um, I had stopped painting for a year and then slowly started up, but then moved across the country. And it's been a year now. I've been in my new studio here. So the paintings are small because I've started 4 or 5 6-foot by 6-foot or 6-foot by 5-foot paintings. I have huge paintings started, but the excitement has been on these little nudes for me this year. So this one's from before, and it's really experimental, or it doesn't feel so much now, but then it was like me figuring out what painting again after a break and major life changes was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it has some very, I mean, it reminds me a little of Philip Guston work, in that it's very flat. You're not really modeling the surfaces much at all, but your more recent work has gone back to a more modeled surface. And so that's interesting that when you stopped for a year, did you consciously give yourself permission to try different, to ease back into it without judging yourself terribly?
Oh no, I was just like, the reason I had to stop was because all the gas is out of the car. Like, I couldn't do anything. So I had to, and I think my reasons for painting needed to evolve and heal. And so it took practically, like, I fought it tooth and nail. Like, I remember being like, okay, so I can't be a painter. What can I be? And I set up a paper mache studio, and I was like getting hangers and starch, and it was like, I can't do this. Can't be a paper mache puppet. I was like, and the messages were just like, let go, release, rest. So when I started painting again, I was like, am I a painter? Like, I let go. I really let go eventually. Cold, dead hands, but let go. So I was just kind of tiptoeing back in, being like, is there anything that's going to catch my interest? Is there anything that I could do that would be interesting to me? What am I not interested in? Like, I can feel that immediately. Old stuff, old shtick. So it's simple and tentative and experimental because I was just going, how about this guy? I don't know. How about this guy, idea-wise?
Mm-hmm. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. This to me is really interesting because of the 4 Polaroids. Tell us the story of this one.
Okay, so this is one I finished this year as well. I guess maybe one of the 3 or 4, or 2022, because it's not this year anymore. It's really similar in theme to the nudes. It's just me. Actually, I think I'm in pants with no shirt on here, taking a picture of myself, observing myself, what I look like, who I am right now, in my bedroom. There's like evidence of things that have gone on abstractly placed on the dresser. Yeah, so it's just me observing myself for myself instead of observing myself and sharing it with somebody. So,
Right.
but it's also in the space of the more intimate picture. So I'm like, here's the setting, kind of a thing.
But now, and I know you are sort of setting the parameter that talking about the technical stuff is not really where you are right now. But I am going to ask you about kind of the stylization decisions that you've made of, like, the 2 lamps, the stylized, the lamp and the reflection of the lamp. That's what's going on. That pink across the top left is the wall, and there's a mirror against
It's a
it.
mirror.
It's the lamp and reflection of lamp.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
It's very similar to the other painting, which we'll get to, except it's tiny and colorful instead of dark and large. The one you were mentioning before, that was spooky.
Right.
And
but also the way you cropped the chair on the lower right.
it's the bed. Yeah, it's the mattress and the bed, the head of the bed.
I like how carefully observed that is, and how the pink color cuts into the frame itself. I mean, the flatness of it. It's interesting, especially in the context of the people who are normally on the reasonably fine art talk, who tend to be very rendering the world as we see it. This is very, very much your vision, as opposed to you're trying to create a great depth of field.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't find it necessary. And I think there's like a truth or a feeling to an image that you can get across in a way that you enjoy getting it across. The truth is important to me, but truth is not, for me, exact hyper realistic representation. I'm not interested in that type of truth. That feels like a simple type of truth. I am doing, not simple to do, but it's very literal. And this is more of a truth of feeling. I don't plan out beforehand how simple or how much detail there'll be. I stop when it's draining instead of it enjoyable. That's all. Like, if I look at something, I'm like, ugh, I don't feel like doing that lamp, which I didn't. I simplified this extremely. The lamp in my bedroom is much more complicated than this. But I was like, is it necessary? No, I don't want to do it. That pink cup wasn't there at all. There was something else there that was ugly. And I remembered my, hold on, favorite pink cup. So I'm in my kitchen. And I remembered it. And I thought, I would feel really happy if my favorite comforting pink mug was on the corner, as sometimes it is. And so I just made a cylinder, and it's like represents a feeling that I felt joyful about. So yeah.
Right. So it's just you're telling the story, and you are choosing the language with which you are telling that story. You're not hidebound to literally describe every single bit. You are selecting what the story is about and how you are telling that story.
Well, I don't even know if I'm choosing the language. I just am speaking my language, which is naturally me. I'm not deciding.
Okay.
I'm observing what feels natural.
Got it. Next slide, please, Betty Sue.
This is fun.
This is important. Evil Lives in the Dark is the name of this painting. So tell us about this one.
Well, the title is from a song, Evil Lives in the Dark, which I'm sure it's from the 60s. I can't remember who did it, but I kept hearing it on the radio while I was painting this painting, and it was perfect. So this was the apartment in Hamtramck, and we had a very ominous, pushy landlord character, and it was very weird and intertwined, and it was like the universe was like, time to move, trying to pry me and my ex who lived here out of this space, or just me, I speak for myself. But it was very cheap and very comfortable, and I liked the neighborhood. And then one day I woke up to, we had a secret garden of a backyard with fruit trees, just the most magical. And they just cut everything down. It was like deforestation. And I was like, I felt raped. I was like, oh my God, this was like a safe, magical place, and it's not. So I always loved this image. It was just a photo I'd taken. I often paint my apartment in colors and designs. And so I'd done these stripes. And I'd had this photo, and it was so flat and interesting and colorful. So I painted this years after I took it, and with around the same time as the one of my friend Vanessa. And it was the first time I added like this cartoony idea of a specter, of a ghost. And it felt so fun and cool. Like there's also sometimes little like like how I drew water when I was a kid, some of that line stuff coming in lately. The ghost has come back in a painting I have at the studio, a really big one.
And is that a television, a stylized what is that in the lower?
It's like a kitchen stool that has a footstool that like folds into it, and it was a cloth, like a tea towel hanging over the back.
Because I mean,
so,
this has part of the menace of this is the things are taking kind of protean living form, things that are not living. That's part of the disturbing aspect of this one, I think.
Yeah, also over the pandemic and all that time alone learning to meditate, I had kind of a lot of mystical experiences. And I think that's also why the ghost is showing up. And if you look at the lower left-hand side, that's light that I just imagined coming in through a window that was there. So it's kind of like good and evil, evil coming from the dark, and just kind of a fun opposites,
right?
Playfulness. Yeah.
Well, that's your sense of fun, Missy. That's yours.
Yeah.
Next slide, please, Betty Sue. Now
this one is ominous.
And again, you are stylizing to a great degree of when I was talking with John Lasseter, some of his color gradations reminded me of in Photoshop when you do a posterization to knock it down to like 4 values or
sure.
Does photographic reproduction, are you referencing that in any way in these?
I'm using photos as reference.
Right.
This is a photo I took of a moment years before I painted it. Just this nostalgic, like scary character from a childhood memory. And I can tell you that the light coming off the TV and the lamp did not look like this in the photo. This is my creation. It's just very me in flow. I like that linear and that like cartoony, I don't know, it's something similar to the ghost in the other one in the way that flows.
It's very similar to the ghost in that way. And so the cartoon figure is like a cartoon Daddy Warbucks type fella.
It's from Alice in Wonderland. It's the Walrus and the Carpenter, where he was like, "Come on, little oysters, I'll show you the way," and then he eats them all, and it's really like the scariest thing for a kid.
Part of when I look at something like this that is so abstracted, still the years of your work of getting your color values and your light values in representational work, the way the light on the tabletop and the light behind the television set, the light shadow area, that isn't something that someone who doesn't know how to paint would be able to do, even though it is very simple the way you're doing it there.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for noticing. Yes, all of my work in being able to paint something realistic is not wasted. If I decide to throw away the things that give me no joy and just paint the rest. And also, they won't be if I go even more abstract in the future or stop painting altogether. It's all in there somehow. I think every lesson that you learn through learning something will help you with everything else in life. So sorry, I made that really huge, but I don't know.
Everything is tied together. I mean, it's all part of the journey, I think.
I think thematically, this one was kind of like, I painted this when we were coming out of like the great dark time of the Trumpness. And so it's kind of like emanations, like creepy, can I cuss, coming out of the television from a fat cat, kind of. I've had this picture for years, and then I was like, ooh, this feels like the right moment to create this kind of insidious clown.
Yes, it is a disturbing painting, but I love the composition of it because it is so sort of off kilter. The edge of the television screen being the edge of the wall. I mean, those lining up. And so the dark shape of the outline of the television itself cutting into that. It's a very sophisticated composition, I think.
Thank you.
Next slide, please, Betty Sue. So is this a recent one?
No, this one's probably not the oldest.
Okay.
2017? No, 18 probably.
Okay, that makes sense, because this does remind me of some of your older stuff when I first started seeing your work. This one has, of the paintings we've seen so far, this one is kind of the most naturalistic and has the greatest depth of field of any of them.
It was a fun challenge because it's ridiculous to have a giant chip bag in the front of your painting. Like, it just seems absurd, and I wanted to figure out I liked the image, and I was like measuring it. I'm like, this chip bag is a monster, and I don't know. It was a fun, and all the junk on the table, what a mess, and figuring out how to make that beautiful. Which now looking at it, I'm like, how did I do that? That's awesome. It's been so long. Like, what a glorious disaster of Easter eggy colors.
No, go ahead.
Oh, just kind of sometimes taking chaos and being able to organize it is fun.
Well, it's also interesting the way you have these intense colors, and then the chaos on the table behind the chip bag is these kind of pastel. The upper right-hand quadrant moves into kind of this pastel world from the intensity of the reds and yellows and blacks of the foreground. And then the chip bag and the cup behind it. The cup behind it is kind of the most rendered item in the painting. And I think that works very well to transition between the abstracted shapes of the chip bag in the foreground and the figure on the bed or on the sofa in the background. To have that the cup as kind of the intermediate point, because that's sort of where the eye goes to, right? I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not used to analyzing them in this way. I was just like, paint something to the amount of finish that feels good. But I like what you're saying. It's nice to hear.
We all have, we all read paintings differently, and my training is, when I look at something, is to try to figure out kind of the techniques of moving the eye through the painting. And that does not have to be the way that someone else reads the painting.
No, yeah, but it's nice to hear. It's good. It's interesting. I like that it's my grandma's Afghan, which is over there on the couch, which has been in many paintings in many different ways. I like that is a Frosty the Snowman mug, which I finally gave away because I was like, I'm done with this part of my life. Goodbye, Frosty. But I'm glad he's in there. I like the real kind of contemporary thing of a pack of cigarettes reflecting in the iPhone, and you can probably tell what I don't know if I remember, but someone who knows about iPhones would be like, that's an iPhone, whatever. I think it was like a 6.
But see, that to me is really interesting. These items have your truth in them. To me, I'm seeing these abstracted shapes. I had not picked up on the iPhone. I now see the iPhone. But I love that even though you're not doing a lot of modeled edges, the edge work that you've got going on between the iPhone screen and the dark of the tabletop, that's very clever and sophisticated. I mean, the amount of confidence in your drawing that is evident here is these are your work is really tough in a way that I think is really inspiring. I think it's really gutsy, and the way you are just willing to do these dark shapes to represent the shadows, these dark shapes to represent the item, but then you have the subtlety of the reflected color on the base of the iPhone, between the chip bag and the iPhone. I mean, it is very careful observation that is going on here, even though there's a huge amount of simplification. And then you're choosing to render the Frosty the Snowman mug, you know, and it was like, oh, that's a Christmas mug, isn't it? I didn't realize it was
Frosty. I think it's because of the sentimentality of a Christmas mug that I chose to render it more. So also, how much detail to put in? It's a fun question, right? To answer. How much is necessary?
Right.
Right? How much is necessary to tell the truth of something? And it's like very cool because sometimes the truth is simple and sometimes and literal, and sometimes the truth of something in your painting is deep and emotional and nostalgic. And so how much information and like technical skill is necessary to tell the truth, because telling the truth is what's important to me and my truth, depends on what is the truth and how deep the truth is. And so there's no formula. It's just being in the moment.
Right. No, and that is our job as painters, is to find our truth and deliver that truth, as opposed to imitating somebody else's truth. It's the point of storytelling. I mean, it's why storytelling is interesting, is because you hear someone's specific story and the way they tell that story. Next slide, please, Betty Sue.
All right, so this is probably the oldest one in here, I think, but it's still a deep favorite of mine. Maybe because it was one of the first ones where I found some of my voice in. So.
And again, you are using the device of a reflection. There's a mirror again.
Yeah, it's me. Can you see me in the background with my iPhone, very in the dark?
Yeah, and compositionally, I think it's beautiful, and I love how blown out the tissue is in the reality plane, and how much more rendered it is in the reflection plane.
Ooh, I hadn't even thought of that. That is very cool. I didn't really. I think I take a lot of images and then one sings out in the same way as if I'm walking through a room and a moment sings out to be photographed. It just feels very like there's something here important, but I hadn't thought of it like the reality is blown out and the
And
other dimension is in detail, but that's a cool thought.
and the painting, the rendering of the bottles in reflection, it's a really, again, with your stuff, one can really start climbing into the painting and seeing so many decisions being made and so much beautiful handling of paint. I think your work is really interesting that way. Next slide, please, Betty Sue.
This is from 2016. I painted this, I think, for a body of work.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it was for a body of work. It was the first time I'd done a body of work for a show. And I've only done that maybe twice now. People were always surprised about this. They have so many assumptions. I tell my students, I'm like, I've never had a solo show. I've done 2 bodies of work, one for a group show and both for a group shows. So this was like one of 24 paintings I did. And it's my favorite, I think, from that grouping.
What is going on at the top? The yellow, the chartreuse band. What are we
just
seeing
abstraction.
Okay.
So it kind of became this color I got inspired by while I was making this body of work. And it ended up being the background for a painting of a television I'd done, just kind of a graphic bright yellow background, which felt good with this like Zenith TV from the 80s. And then I just kind of liked it and used it as a problem solver, right? Because the top of that was weird and cut off, and I didn't want to render it. And so, yeah, it's just a different tool.
Right. Now, my reading of this is, I see in the design, it reminds me a lot of kind of the Bernie Fuchs 1960s advertising illustration of kind of that forced perspective and the color world, and having I assume it's foliage outside the window, just being that you're defining it by the grayish blue color. That's how you define the greenish shape.
Yeah.
And then by having that chartreuse band and the two-tone green-gray of the continuation of the windowsill, that to me looks so kind of early 1960s
awesome.
color. I think I love what it does, because it moves from this naturalistic world of the cup and the cigarette butts. So it's got the repeating ovals of the cup and the mug and the planter. But then it moves into this abstract Dodge Dart 1963 in the background.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. That's cool. I like that work. So that feels like a nice compliment to get. There are other paintings, which I don't have in the slideshow, from that body of work where I went even more kind of graphic and abstract, maybe more than I'm interested in doing now, but who knows? But where I did I had a couple pictures of a TV, and we were watching Rocky, and I took a bunch of pictures of scenes of the movie because it was like one of my dad's favorite, and we were just having fun. And I often take pictures of watching things on TV that are nostalgic. So they show up in paintings, but I just stacked them on top of each other, though there weren't 2 TVs stacked. And I wanted to do in the cartoons when they show what TVs look like that kind of wavy, but I actually didn't have the confidence in 2016 to freehand the wiggle wave. So I did triangular pointy waves, but yeah, so I did a lot of experimentation in that body of work with abstraction for the love of it, for design.
Pure abstraction and design. Interesting. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. I like this just because of the the mundanity of the nominal subject matter. Just a cheese sandwich. So, when does this date from?
So I was asked by Artists and Illustrators magazine to do a still life step-by-step article. And so I was trying to find something I was interested in painting, and my partner at the time just always had a tummy ache, just constantly had a tummy ache, and I was always making chicken noodle soup and simple foods. And so it was like a big part of my existence to heat up chicken noodle soup for a tummy ache. So there was like a lot behind this still life for me, which I kind of need more these days. So it was a very mundane moment in my existence. Just queen of chicken noodle soup.
And is this oil? I mean, it looks almost like watercolor, but okay, it is oil.
Yeah. Well, oil's so fantastically dynamic. You can make it look like watercolor or gouache or whatever.
Right.
Sculpture.
And again, there's so much that goes on with reflection and how glass transforms. The tricks you do with the mirrors, but on this you've got a translucent volumetric form in the upper left, and I believe we're looking at those brushy the purplish and brownish. That is, we're seeing it through that glass. Is that correct?
Actually, no. It was a white picture, which I just couldn't be bothered to paint, and the two brush strokes were me testing what color it needed to be, and then I was like, that looks good enough. I like that.
All right. Well, it reads pretty well as a volumetric milky glass.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I was right then. It was enough. Like, I didn't need to render it. It was nice to have this space, like all these little things close together, and then just to have like the countertop and this white thing give us a little exit.
Right.
Yeah.
And the way you define the far side of the chicken noodle soup cup by the items lying behind it. I mean, to let go of that edge between the table and the cup. That's I love that. I love that kind of graphic approach. Really nice drawing work in this one. And this reminds me of those portraits you were doing when you were doing all those self-portraits. The way you were handling the paint, especially on the cup is really impressively observed. Put it that way.
Thank you. Yeah, I worked hard on that cup. It's an ellipse is no laughing matter.
And you threw in a couple others just for good measure in there.
Yeah.
The gas flame and the one over on the side. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. And now this one, okay, is Felicia inspired at all by Wayne Thiebaud? Not just the food aspect, but the vibrancy of everyday stuff. That's interesting.
I don't think so. I never really was that moved by the frosting consistency, like so
right
everywhere. I like a dynamic range of textures, but so I didn't study him, but he's cool.
He's cool. Yeah. All right, talk about this one a little. There's some very interesting decisions being made here.
Yeah, this was me at the start of the pandemic, feeling like something huge was about to change in my life and trying to settle down and paint to be meditative and figure out what was going on. And everything was about to change, and I kind of knew it. So it's an image I liked about veggies I grew and pickles I made, but really it's like light. I made up a lot of like the background where there's like light, and it's kind of like stars or space or just pink and goldy colored, like really thick pieces. It's completely abstract, but it's conceptual because it was like on the periphery I can see something. I don't know what it is. So I was just painting a still life and using it as a vehicle to meditate and try to figure out what was coming.
Mm-hmm. I think, again, this is really interesting to go from the carefully observed, rendered, the pickle jar, and then you have these on the upper right and lower left, these completely abstract mark makings of the effervescent bubbles on the right and the graphic, the red highlights on the lower left, and then the enigmatic banana-like edge form over there on the middle right.
I think it was like a manila envelope, but yeah.
It's enigmatic. We'll go with enigmatic. But then again, the edges and rendering. When you choose to render, you can render the hell out of something. I mean, I love the shape of the. Are they tomatoes behind the canning jar?
Yeah.
And the simplification, the graphic power of the way the cucumber slices are rendered. Really, you're graphically so doing this high wire act of where you flatten things out, and then even within that context, it still has all this depth to it. It's very impressive, I think.
Thank you. I love hearing that. That's nice. As I'm just sitting here being like, whoa, dude, your domestic life was about to dissolve into the abyss. That's what was happening here. You were making pickles, and on the periphery, like mystical stuff was coming in, and like it's like me owning a house, a very 1950s house in Detroit, and making pickles and having a garden was dissolving around the edges than when I made this. And I mean, I never would make a painting that like with the literal intent of saying that, because obviously you don't know what's happening in the moment, but kind of cool.
But that in retrospect, one can see that in one's work. And wow, there was something changing there. Betty Sue, can you make our heads large again? So, well, thank you for taking us through that look into your work. And going forward, you're saying that you are willing to look at not being a painter. You're willing to.
Well, at this point, I think I am one still, but I think I want to keep being one. That's more important. There was just a time where I didn't have. I just needed to refill. I just didn't have a reason.
Right.
If there comes a time where I don't want to be a painter, then that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good way to look at it, I think. We did have one last technical question, which was that you usually paint on wood. Do you prepare the wood in any way, and why wood?
I paint on all the things. I paint on Arches oil paper for little paintings. I paint on wood. I just buy cradled birch from like Blick, and I buy it unprimed, and then I use the PDA size or whatever. You can use rabbit skin glue, depending on what you're doing, and then prime it, gesso it myself, just with acrylic gesso. I tried the whole wisdom of the masters with the rabbit skin glue and the oil, and I didn't find it that much better for me.
Right, and it's much easier to just use the acrylic gesso. Well, thank you, Felicia, for taking the time to talk with us. And I urge folks to take a look at your work. You're just FeliciaForte.com.
Yep.
And it'll be fascinating to see what you do next. So
thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been super fun.
All right. Thank you all, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Take good care. Bye-bye.